Making sure that you are being very strategic when you're launching your podcast cannot be stressed enough. And today's guest, I love this conversation because we went through how he was very strategic with not only launching his show, but planning for the future. What does that look like for his podcast? How can he ensure that what he's talking about is relevant for his audience, but also has the lifespan that it needs to have going forward? This guest is a little different though. I've never had someone on who is a realtor or has had that kind of experience and taken the one-to-many approach. So we talk all through his business model, why he decided to go that route, and what really drove him to do the right market research to ensure that his podcast is successful long term. Please join me in welcoming Sage to the podcast. Hello, Sage. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today. So if you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and about your podcast.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Alicia. My name is Sage Weiss, and there's many ways to describe who I am and what I do. But simply put, I'm a podcaster. I host the Life, Money, and More podcast. I'm also on YouTube, and I am a real estate agent that connects buyers and sellers in all 50 states and even other countries with agents. Among other things, I'm also an actor. So that's a long list of things, I know.
No, I love it. Very multi-passionate, right? I think that there's nothing wrong with being multi-passionate. And also I feel like in today's day and age, which seems like a silly way to say it, but like currently you need to have a few different things going on in order to sustain a life, the kind of life that you want to have, right? So real estate and podcasting, especially with the way that your business model is, where you have more of a one-to-many, you're talking about some potential international conversations, all within all the 50 states. What does that look like for you when you were like, all right, I'm going to launch a podcast. This is going to be awesome.
Well, I can't say it's an idea that I had like right away. It's something that was birthed out of several months of basically trial and error and failure. So I come into the real estate business at essentially the worst time in history. Not in history as in total, but in my lifetime. I'm only 25, and the market in 2023, which is when I entered at the very beginning, was really, really rough. So I get into real estate at possibly the worst time. And not only do I get in at the worst time, I also get to observe everyone else having a bad time. So I see agents fleeing the business, mortgage lenders fleeing the business. And I say to myself, I don't really want to be an agent. How do I use these skills and these talents that I've acquired over years of training in various sales roles and then going to acting school and acting for the camera, being a signed actor? How do I use those skills in real estate? And there's this I can't tell you what day or what hour, but a switch went off in my head and said, why don't you do podcasting? Why don't you do YouTube? Why don't you do what you were trained to do? Get in front of a camera, get in front of a mic, and start talking about real estate and personal finance. And I looked out in the world and I didn't see a lot of young voices in the world. Like I'm like a big Dave Ramsey fan. I like Graham Stephan. I like the Money Guys. These are all people that are older. And I was like, I could be a Gen Z personal finance real estate person. And I thought that was really interesting. So I started pursuing it, and I started my podcast and I started my YouTube channel, and I've been flying. It's been quite the journey. And I've basically built this business model, and I'm trying to build this life by design where I have a voice in the world where there's so many voices, and I get to help people. I get to change lives, and I get to do, most importantly, what I love. Because I'll be honest with you, I've almost hated every single job I've ever had, whether it was working at Kroger or some sales role that didn't really mean much to me. I got to find like what I actually enjoy doing. And for the first time in my life, I honestly feel like this real estate thing, podcasting, YouTube, it isn't work. It's fun. And at 25, I got to find that, and I get to make money too. So I feel so blessed to have found that so young.
I love that you explained that, like, you have this background, you have this education that you've got. How can you take that with something that actually interests you and that you enjoy doing and bring it to the forefront. And I think that it's so important as podcasters and content creators that when we are creating something in the podcasting space, we have to be excited about it. I could talk about podcasting for hours and days, clearly, with the amount of episodes that I have. This is a
Yeah.
topic that I could not stop talking about. So that shows in the voice, in the inflection, in all the hand gestures that happen on video. It's there. And I think that it's really important that when you decide, I'm going to have a show or I'm going to do a video, it has to be something you're really passionate about, or at least have a very deep interest in order for that to reflect out well. And I also love what you mentioned about how you looked around and you saw that there weren't a lot of people with your perspective or your voice sharing this information. That's market research. And I don't think enough podcasters do market research to actually get their shows like before they start. So what were you where were you looking? I have a whole episode on market research. We'll make sure that we link that in the show notes. But what was your kind of process for that aspect of it?
Well, I've been an avid YouTube consumer my whole life, and I really, really got into personal finance right about when I turned 23. Long story short, my life was basically a mess with money. Like a lot of Americans, I was in debt. I wasn't making a lot of money, so essentially, I hit rock bottom at Christmas time around age 23, and I go through this financial transformation where I essentially do the Dave Ramsey thing and pay off all my debt. That changed my life, essentially. Not having any debt was really big. And I went through this transformation where I started actually investing and saving money. And I won't tell you my exact net worth. I'll just say it's a lot higher than most people for my age, but it took me having negative $20,000 at one point, and it's taken a lot of work to get in the positive. But I came across Dave Ramsey, and then I saw that there were all these people that love Dave Ramsey, but also disagree with a lot of stuff that he says. He's much older. He doesn't do so well with Gen Z or millennials. So I was like, who's someone who is the opposite of him? So I started watching like Graham Stephan or Humphrey Yang. So I got this side of the aisle, then I got this side of the aisle. And then I was like, okay, who's in the middle? So I looked at the no debt people, and then I looked at the we love credit cards and using debt people. And then I kind of researched in the middle, and I'm like, there's not a lot of people that do both, really. And I just noticed everyone was much older than me. And I was like, how can I be a voice that speaks to people who find value in both sides and also people in the middle? So if you watch my YouTube videos, if you listen to my podcast, you'll see I kind of, in a way, play both sides. I see value in both, but I also like to be in the middle. So I did that market research, as you mentioned, and I just found that there weren't a lot of people in the middle. And one of the things that makes people really upset when it comes to personal finance and real estate is people can be super opinionated and they can get very defensive of their views. And I was like, how can I be a person that doesn't piss people off? Essentially, and I kind of carved out this little area for myself where I'm kind of in the middle in a way, and it's working. But that took 3 months of research, market research. It took a long time for me. I had to consume a lot of content, talk with a lot of creators, do a lot of research, and I also have fantastic analytical tools as well. So yeah, if it wasn't for that market research, I'd kind of be lost.
Yeah. I love that approach too. Like, I'm a millennial and I do not care for Dave Ramsey because when he talks about like childcare and things like that, I have 2 children. They're 10 and 7. When we were trying to decide, are they going to go? Because I've always been the worker. I've always been the one who's making the money. And me and my husband were looking at what are our options. It was a full 2 months worth of mortgages to send our kids to daycare. That is ridiculous. It didn't even make sense for my husband to literally hand over his paycheck and say, here you go. And now, so he's been a stay-at-home dad for the last 6 years now, I want to say. And he loves it. He gets tons of enjoyment and satisfaction from it. And I check with him regularly. Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And he's like, yep, I love it. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. We're both living our best lives. That's great. But it is a struggle when you hear people like Dave Ramsey who tend to be really out of touch with millennials and Gen Z, with like what actually the job market looks like, what pay actually looks like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of bills we're struggling with. So to have someone who's in that range of people who understand, hey, this is what you're probably going through, I think is so valuable. And the fact that you got in when you did. Because if you look at, okay, if you continue doing this for the next 3, 5 years, 10 years, at that point, you're the guy people know, right? As the person who understands what they're struggling with.
Yeah, and it takes time to grow an audience, and it takes time to, as I've been finding out with podcasting and YouTube, it takes a lot of time. I have an editor now who's helped channels build their audiences to significant numbers, and on average, it can take 400 videos to get a channel to 100,000 subscribers or more. It can take 4 years to grow that YouTube channel, 4 or 5 years. So I look at my journey as a 4 to 5 year marathon. And some of my favorite creators, that's about how long it took them to be a big voice in their community. So I'm, in a way, kind of just at the beginning, I would say.
I love that you're aware of that. I think a lot of people go into podcasting or content creating and they're like, yeah, I'm totally going to be a YouTube star next week, or I'm going to, make hundreds of thousands of dollars from this channel. It's like, sorry, that's not really how it works. But I love
No,
that
it
you're
isn't.
doing it, and I love that
You're
you
right.
see that perspective. It's important, I think,
Mhm.
to have real goals, right? So in the green room, we were talking about your cadence and what that looks like for you. And you mentioned that you do every 5 days. I'm curious how you came to that decision, or was it just like, this is what is going to work for me, or this was suggested to me, or what did that look like for you?
I wanted to strike a balance per se. At first, I started out every 3 days, and then I realized as a new podcaster and YouTuber that wasn't sustainable in a way because I hadn't nailed down my process a lot. And then I switched to 4 days, and it was still a little much. And then I moved to 5 days. And what I do is I batch record several episodes at a time, and then I schedule them. And I found that that's what successful creators do. They go ahead and they make a lot of content at once and they prepare it all and then they schedule it just in case life happens. So I found that if I can record 3, 4 episodes at a time, and I'm also doing interviews like this too, there's this backlog of episodes, and that protects me from a surprise trip or an emergency or anything like that. And I do the same thing with my YouTube videos. Like I have 27 YouTube videos scheduled for every week for the rest of the year. And instead, and I don't know if you ever get this feeling too, I was so tempted just to start like throwing episodes out into the world and getting everything like now. And I found that that would be dangerous because then I would experience what a lot of people who are in YouTube and podcasting, they'd basically just be like, oh crap, now I have to create content. And it's just like this hamster wheel. So I wanted to get ahead of that. So I've purposefully not released content for the past like month on YouTube just because I've been building all those videos with my editor. So it's very strategic. I think you have to find a balance between your willingness, your need, I should say, to do everything now and get it out there versus planning and being strategic.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I like to say that while content is king, that consistency is queen, right? So you get to pick what that consistency looks like, but the key is your capacity. What are you
Mhm.
personally able to accomplish and actually do in a way that's sustainable? Because with things like a YouTube channel or a podcast, you're right. You do get this idea of, oh, I have 3 months worth of content. I could just release a little extra here or there. I could release more at a time. But then you get to the end of that. You're like, oh man, I have bronchitis, or, my dog is sick, or something happens, inevitably that happens that
Mhm.
ends up messing up with that schedule. And then you've set this consistency and now your capacity does not match. So I think that it's strategic, it's smart, and I love that you did that because I wish more people did that. Granted, not everybody has the ability to, just in the way that they like to work or they're able to work, but I am also someone, I love to batch record for my solo podcast. I try to do 4 at a time, but I've tested with different episodes. Like all right, I'm going to batch record 5 at a time. What does that look like? By the time I get to the 5th, I'm exhausted. I've also tried 8 episodes at a time because I was going on vacation. That was miserable. Never again. So you have to just figure out what's going to work for you.
I think it's also important, and for me, this is what I did, and I have the budget to do this. I know not everyone does, but I have an editor now, and when I tried to edit my own YouTube videos, I mean, they looked good, but God, they were horrendous. And actually bringing on a professional, I'm kind of like king delegation now. I delegate everything. I had someone make my podcast intro and outro. I had someone make my podcast cover art. I've hired a consultant to speak with about my podcast. Like, I have software that helps me with the podcast. So I think finding ways to delegate as much of that as possible has really helped, because to edit one of my YouTube videos, my editor, Sergio, it takes him 7 hours for a 10-minute video. I mean, these are really high quality videos with lots of edits in them. And I would be exhausted if I had to try and do that myself. So I looked at what all the bigger podcasts and YouTubers do, and they basically all have someone helping them. Very few of them edit their own content unless they're super technical or they're very, very specific, like they're professional editors or photographers. So I don't think this would be sustainable if I didn't have help. And I basically wanted to start at the very beginning of my show and podcast. The very start, I wanted to implement the strategies that the big boys do. And having a professional in my corner has made all the difference. And I think that's really going to start to show once I get to the year mark or the 2-year mark or the 3-year mark. Because the thing about YouTube and podcast is these episodes, they live forever. And with my business, someone can go to a video 3 years from now and become a client of mine. So I wanted to be very strategic and try to have the best that I could while also balancing that need for everything now. So that's kind of the approach I've taken with that.
Oh, that's so good. I love that so much. Now, your business model, I want to talk about that for a second because I think it's so fascinating. And I love a podcast and a YouTube channel for this business model. But you mentioned, like, kind of, all right, you tried the real estate thing and being a realtor, that was miserable. And then you came up with this idea of kind of matchmaking. What did that look like? And for people who are like, well, maybe I need somebody, how can they kind of learn more about what you do?
There's lots of people that need a somebody when it comes to real estate. So essentially, I already talked about how this idea was birthed, but I wanted to have a business that wasn't tied to one area. And one of the problems with being a traditional real estate agent or a realtor is that your business is dependent on your market, where you live. Most people can only do business within an hour. And I said, how do I make a business that not only operates in my state, but also can travel with me wherever I go, and also can operate in all 50 states, and also can operate in Canada or Japan or Dubai or wherever? And this was the answer, was referrals. There are multi-billion-dollar companies that do referrals. Zillow would be one of the biggest ones. There's agents that pay thousands of dollars a month for Zillow referrals or Zillow leads. Dave Ramsey has his own platform. They probably do billions of dollars a year in volume in terms of referrals. So I looked at those examples and I was like, I could do the same thing. So essentially, people come to me, buyers or sellers, first-time home buyers, people that want to purchase luxury homes, commercial property, land, and people have a million questions. And one of the issues with real estate is it can be really high pressure, be really stressful. And one of the issues is when you give your info out to an agent or a company, you've just opened the floodgate. You're never going to stop hearing from them ever again. And I found that people, when they have all these questions, they want someone to talk to. They want someone to answer their questions. They want to basically consult with someone on their purchase or their sale. So people come to me, and let's give an example. They're a first-time home buyer. They have a bunch of questions, and they want to talk about their purchase with someone who isn't going to try to hard sell them or immediately get them to sign some contract. So a perfect example of a client that works with me is someone who wants to buy a house. So let's say Arizona, and they have a down payment, and they're like, hey, what do I do? I have all these questions in my head. And most people, when they have questions, turn to YouTube, the vast majority of people. And some of them also listen to podcasts. So people they come to me with their questions and their dreams and their desires, and I can spend anywhere from 30 minutes with them to 3 hours with them. And I've done this really successfully where people have come to me from all over with what they want to do, and I'll talk with them, and it's free. I don't charge people for that. The part where I make money is when I connect the parties together. The agent pays me for that service. So not only do I offer this consulting and this advice and being a ear for someone to just say everything they need to say, it's free for them. And my talent is matching people up. So then I get to go and find that agent for them and pair them together. And my success rate so far is about 90%. So it's really, really high. And people really love knowing that they can speak to someone who's really familiar with real estate, who's knowledgeable, who is not trying to become their agent per se. And then I could go out and find an agent that's quality. And then I can pair the two together. And it's a boutique service, I would say. And it's for people that care about customer service and care about quality of service, and people that like to, I would say, look before they leap, which is very much me. So that's kind of a breakdown. And that can be for anyone. That can be for someone who wants to buy a $200,000 house. That could be for someone who wants to buy a $3 million warehouse for their business, or purchase a $2.5 million beach house in the Outer Banks. I've talked to people who have $200,000 house in mind, people who have a $2 million house in mind. So my client base is wide, and that's kind of the breakdown. I mean, it's an incredible business model, and I love talking with people, because real estate for most people is this convoluted mess, and there's so much info out there. And also, it's really scary because mistakes in real estate get very, very expensive. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked with that were like, hey, I wish I could have talked to you sooner because I bought this house and I don't like it. Or I sold my house and I wish I hadn't. So part of my job too is helping people not make bad decisions. There's a lot of data out there that points to COVID being a massive influx of bad decisions. About half of people who purchased their house during COVID regret their house purchase. So I've actually stopped people from walking into big messes and getting themselves into deals that were really bad too. So yeah, I am a consultant, and people book 30 minutes, they book 3 hours. I can't tell you how much I love it. I always love meeting someone new. It's fantastic. And then the other wonderful thing is every new client I have, it increases my network and grows my network as well. So I kind of look at my business, and not in a gross way, but kind of like a fungus or a flower field. It's like it grows out, and every new node is a new connection. And I view my business like this beautiful big field of flowers, and it's growing all over the country. And it's incredible. You can tell how passionate I am about it. I'll stop talking about it, but that's the breakdown right there.
I love that so much. And you can hear the passion that you have for it. And even as you were talking about, like, the customer service, I think is so important when it comes to a topic like this. People are sick of just putting in their email and getting hits from all over the place when I don't know you, I don't like you yet, I don't trust you to make these really expensive deals on my behalf. So having someone in their corner who can stand with them and say, this is a good idea or this is a bad idea, I think is so impactful. And like you said, it does, once they have that awesome connection with you and that awesome what you've created for them. Wow, I have this house. I love it. I'm happy. Oh, you need someone to help you? You need to go to Sage. Please go talk to him because he can help you. And I think that is where, like, it's so important. Now, tying that back to your podcast, I am curious. So because you matchmake on both sides, where do you focus with your content? When you're coming up with new ideas for your podcast, do you focus specifically on the person who's buying, or do you kind of mix it? What does that look like?
So I cover a wide range of topics, I would say, and that's one of the struggles of being a content creator is what content do you create? And you have to be strategic with it. But for me, for the podcast at least, the podcast is very, I like to kind of rotate episodes. So I like to at least do a mix between real estate and personal finance. Like, I have my list of ideas like right in front of me, podcast episodes ideas. It's everything real estate and personal finance. It's not necessarily just targeted towards buyers and sellers. So a great example of that would be like I'm doing an episode soon on how to increase property value. Then I'm doing an episode on the dangers of Airbnb investing and where Airbnb has went wrong. And then I'm doing house flipping episode. And then I'm doing an episode on why prenups can be really important for people when it comes to personal finance. So I like to rotate them constantly. So I'm not just making just real estate videos, but also, this is the market research thing. I have tools at my disposal. I can hop on vidIQ and I can see what videos are performing really well on YouTube. And I can literally see what questions people are asking. So I think one of the issues real estate agents have, especially people on YouTube, and this is just any content creator, is they make what they want to make. And you shouldn't be making your videos based on what you want to make. You should be making your videos and podcast episodes on what people are Googling, what they're searching for. So you look at a lot of real estate YouTubers and all their videos are like really convoluted and weird. And it's like, oh, yeah, you just had an idea and you put it out there. What I like to do is I like to do the research and see how many people are actually Googling this, how many people are typing this in YouTube, how many people want this video. And then I make that. So I literally go out there and I hunt for the things that people are asking about instead of just making whatever I want to make.
You are speaking my language. I love data. I love digging into like what are people actually looking for versus just talking about all the things that you want to talk about. Otherwise, I would have 50 podcasts or I would just have one that's about 50 different topics because there are so many interests that we have. So I love this approach. I've loved this conversation. Can you tell everyone, now that we've kind of wrapped up, where they can find you, get to know you, if they are looking to buy or sell a house and they're like, I kind of need Sage in my life, where can they go?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get a hold of me. I make myself very available and accessible. So the most common way people would actually get to me would be through my website and my company, which is sageconnectrealty.com. People also email me a lot, and that is, I don't know how I got this email, but it's just my first name, SAGE at KW.com. That is a great way to get a hold of me too. And then some people will leave comments on my YouTube videos, or you can also, and this is really cool, you can send fan mail through, I believe, Buzzsprout, I think. I've had some people reach out to me through my podcast. There's a feature where people can send you messages, which I didn't know was a thing until recently. So the best ways to get a hold of me is website, YouTube. I'm also publicly available. You can literally just Google my name and my phone number pops up. As a real estate professional, people call me too. I have a screening service, and if I don't pick up, you just leave a message. That's one of the pros of working in real estate and one of the cons too. I get a lot of spam calls. But there's a lot of ways to get a hold of me. There's no one right way, but those are just 3 or 4 of the ways people usually do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sage. This has been such a great conversation, and I had a ton of fun.
I did too. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your audience, and I can't wait to hear from the fantastic listeners of Listeners to Leads.